KPBS On Demand is supported by the Del Mar Wine and Food Festival, September 10th through the 14th. Created in partnership with Alex Morgan, Drew Brees, and Rob Machado. Hosted by Food Network's Troy Johnson. A celebration of SoCal culture, cuisine, and community. General and VIP tickets at delmar.wine.
Welcome in San Diego. It's Jade Hindman. On today's show, we hear from State Senator Akilah Weber and political scientist Thad Kousser about the latest on California's redistricting effort and the national implications. This is KPBS Midday Edition, connecting our communities through conversation. In November, California voters will get to weigh in on Governor Gavin Newsom's plan to redraw U.S. House districts. The goal is to give Democrats a better chance at winning additional seats in next year's midterm elections. The move would counter a Trump-backed Republican effort in Texas to redraw district maps there. So how are our local lawmakers feeling about the redistricting effort here? Joining me now is State Senator Akilah Weber Pearson. She represents California's 39th State Senate District, and she's also chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus. Senator Weber, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So glad to have you here. So California relies on an independent redistricting commission to draw district lines across the state. So why do you feel it is now necessary to change that?
Well, it's not necessarily a change because we will still have our independent commission to draw the lines every 10 years. This proposition does not get rid of that. But what we are recognizing is that what is happening in Washington is having a significant negative impact on the residents of California. Lives are not becoming more affordable. We are in a situation where we're dealing with tariffs, where we're dealing with higher prices. Inflation is just ridiculously high. They just passed that bill, H.R. 1, which is going to have a significant devastating effect on our healthcare system, on people being able to get food and jobs and everything. And so, traditionally what happens is you have legislators and they pass laws and voters get an opportunity to weigh in on whether or not those laws and those new policies are positively or negatively impacting their lives when they go to the voting polls. And so what we were seeing is that instead of that happening this time, Trump was rigging this system to increase his chances of staying in power and not necessarily allowing the voters to truly be able to say how they're feeling if his current policies are working. And so considering the extremely damaging impacts that some of his policies are having and will be having on the state of California, we needed to make sure that we were doing all that we could to ensure that our voters would have an opportunity to say whether or not we wanted to have more of a representation to ensure that we have more power to push back on some of those policies, those very harmful policies coming out of Washington, D.C. So we're not getting rid of the Citizens Redistricting Commission. That is still in place. This is just something that would happen right now to help us with the midterm elections in 2026.
So you mentioned some of the policies. So, Senator, ultimately, what's at stake here?
Well, I think, people are seeing what is at stake. You go to the grocery stores and the prices are still high. Kids are just starting school and the cost of school supplies have been higher than before. Everyone has heard about the big, beautiful bill. However, the impacts, California is going to be losing billions of dollars. About 3.4 million people are at risk of losing their insurance, their healthcare insurance. Our hospitals are going to be extremely harmed. People aren't going to be unable to get different assistance programs that they normally have had. And, from a healthcare perspective, seeing that I am a physician as well, I'm very concerned about the overall short-term and long-term impacts of these policies. And, we as constituents, we as Californians, we as members of this great country need to have our ability to have our voices heard, and our voices are heard through our votes. And when you come through and you change the system and you say, as President Texas, go and change this and get me more Republican seats, that then does not allow for him to be held accountable for the policies that his administration has put forward.
So what can you tell us about the ballot measure then going before voters this fall? What do they need to know?
Yeah. So, we in California, we are unlike Texas. This is not unlike what Texas has done. Texas has a history of gerrymandering. They are the most frequently sued state for gerrymandering since the Voter Rights Act. We have gone through and we have the people who did the map. They actually our leadership worked with people who have an interest in this area, who know California. They watched the old hearings of the Citizens Redistricting Commission to see where could these lines be drawn to make Congress a little bit more favorable for California and California values. And we're not pushing this on the voters. We're giving the voters the opportunity to say, yes, number one, we want to do redistricting at this time. And two, these are the maps that we want. If the voters choose not to do it, then California doesn't do it. But that's what Prop 50 is. Unlike Texas that just drew the maps and their constituents just have to deal with it, we are giving our voters the option to say whether or not they want to have their voices more strongly heard when it goes to Washington, D.C., or if they don't want to get themselves involved in this at all right now.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people are calling what's happening in Texas gerrymandering. How do you respond to concerns that this effort here in California is in itself gerrymandering?
Right. Well, when you look at the way that Texas did its map, they literally went through communities of interest and just completely devastated them, chopped them up in interesting ways that definitely violate the Voter Rights Act. And that is something that is unfortunately a part of Texas history. That's why I said they're the most frequently sued state for gerrymandering and for violating the Voters' Civil Rights Act. We did not do that. When you look at the maps, there is no violation of any specific components of the Voting Rights Act. It's not the same as what they did in Texas, which was to specifically say, okay, here's a group of Latinos in this area. We're going to chop this group up in 4 different ways to dilute their voting power. That is not what those who created this map did.
And, what concerns do you have about changing California districts in such a short time?
Yeah. So, I, in all honesty, when I initially heard about all of this that was going on, my heart sunk. I see so many things that are happening recently over this year, which seems like, gosh, a lifetime, that are really rolling back a lot of what I consider to be just foundational American values. And one of those is we have census every 10 years and redistricting every 10 years. But unfortunately, these are not normal times. And California, along with the rest of the nation, but California is really taking a beating from this administration. And we have to at least allow our voters the opportunity to stand up and do all that we can do. Now, yes, we are just one state, but my job as a representative of the state is to look out for the residents of Senate District 39 and the residents of California. And a part of looking out for them is giving them this opportunity.
Well, we'll all hear from voters in November, but so far, what have you heard from your constituents about the redistricting plan?
Everyone, honestly, who has talked to me about it has been extremely positive and extremely thankful for the fact that we are actually standing up and doing this. You're right, we'll hear from the voters in November, but for those constituents that were aware of what was happening when I was home for summer break, they were thanking me and they were saying, we stand with you, we support this effort because they understand what has happened and they understand what is at stake if our country continues down this current path.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so there are some folks out there who are criticizing California Democrats for this effort and saying, hey, 2 wrongs don't make a right. How do you see it, Senator?
I agree. 2 wrongs don't make a right. And I'm not necessarily saying that in this situation that this is wrong. We have to do what we can to ensure the overall health and well-being of our country, of our nation, but also of our state. And a part of that is allowing for yourself to be held accountable for the things that occur under your watch. And when you change the system, when you change the rules of the game, it would be irresponsible of those of us in California to not allow for residents of California to be able to have their voices and how we should respond as a state to that.
Well, earlier this week, President Trump said the Department of Justice plans to sue California for its effort. What have you heard about that, and what's your reaction?
This administration, like I said, has been coming after California since day one. So whether it's suing over this, suing over the way in which we vote in California, trying to, get $1 billion out of our, UCLA. I mean, they destroying our, education department. I would say that this is just another thing in the long list that this administration has been doing to California, to be quite honest with you.
Well, these are certainly unprecedented times, and this is not the last, of course, that we'll be hearing of this. I've been speaking with State Senator Akilah Weber Pearson. She represents California's 39th District. She's also chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus. Senator, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
You too. Still to come, political scientist Thad Kousser continues our discussion with a focus on how redistricting will impact San Diego County. KPBS Midday Edition is back after the break. Welcome back to KPBS Midday Edition. I'm Jade Hindman. We've been talking about California Democrats' push to redraw districts in order to counter a power grab from the White House and Texas Republicans. Well, now we want to zoom in on what this could mean for San Diego voters. Joining me with that part of this discussion is Thad Kousser. He's a professor of political science at UC San Diego. Professor, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jade.
So glad to have you here. So we just heard from State Senator Akilah Weber. What jumps out to you from what she told us?
Well, I think she, like Democrats in California, is smartly making the case that this is essentially a referendum on Donald Trump, on him as a person, on his policies, and then most especially on what Democrats are casting as his attack on the democracy by rigging the midterms in a way, by redrawing districts in Texas, in Florida, potentially places like Ohio and Indiana, in a way that would make him invulnerable in the midterms, even if voters sharply turn against him. So that's what they're focusing on, rather than, hey, these districts are better, this process is better. They're saying Donald Trump is fighting dirty and we need to fight back. Make this November vote a referendum on him.
Now, Proposition 50 heads to the ballot this November, as you mentioned. It would allow Californians to adopt a new congressional map. If passed, though, what would that mean for San Diego specifically?
Well, San Diego is in many ways now a political microcosm of the state, and in this redistricting map, it would be no different. So California is a blue state by about a 60-40 margin. So there's still millions upon millions of Republicans across the state and many in California. But because of the way that districts are drawn now in San Diego, 4 out of our 5 congressional seats are very friendly to Democrats, or battlegrounds where Democrats have earned those victories in places like Mike Levin's district that's been a constant source of contention. What this new map would do is really give Democrats a fighting chance to take that East County district, right now the 48th district, currently held by Darrell Issa. These new maps essentially trade Poway, fairly strongly Republican area, take that out of the district and add Palm Springs, a Democratic-leaning area And that would move this district from one where Republicans have a really substantial, about a 15 or so percent points edge in the vote, to one that's pretty near evenly matched, or even Democrats have as much as a 3% edge. So that would take San Diego's lone remaining congressional district and make it vulnerable, make it up for grabs, and give us it would make San Diego potentially in a unanimously Democratic district, even though there are many, many thousands of Republicans here.
Wow. Well, not long after this, Democrat Amar Campanajjar made public his intent to run for the 48th district seat, which he previously ran for back in 2020. How would the new map lines potentially help his candidacy this time around?
It gives him a much more favorable ground to contest. He ran very close elections. In 2020, he lost, I think, about 7 or 8 percentage points to Darrell Issa, and he had lost just narrowly to Duncan Hunter when he was under a cloud of investigations in 2018. Those were times when this was a pretty deeply red district, and Amar Kampanajjar, is a candidate who had, links to the district, a charismatic appeal. He was able to run ahead of where other Democratic candidates were running in those district boundaries. His hope now is that, well, with a fair fight, he could beat Darrell Issa one-on-one, and he'll clearly have a lot of money to do that. He's been a prodigious fundraiser himself, but also able to attract money from national groups like the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. That's the push behind his campaign.
Do you expect other prominent names to enter the race as well?
Well, there's a possibility that Will Rawlins, who is a Democratic candidate who ran in a Palm Spring-based district. So the Palm Springs used to be in a district that stretched out east and north into the desert. It was Republican held for a long time. Will Rawlins ran really strongly, and there's been some speculation that he would hop into this district, although the bulk of this district is really San Diego, and it's much more Amar Kampanajjar's home turf. And I'm thinking that there's often, when you have two prominent candidates, there's often some leadership intervention and behind the scenes discussion. I don't know anything about this, but the fact that Amar Kampanajjar got in first to this race may be an attempt to really try to clear the field of other strong candidates.
All right. Well, I want to circle back and underscore what's happening here because, how does redistricting typically work in California, and why is this such a significant departure from that?
Well, we've had a lot of different ways of running redistricting in California since the one person, one vote era, starting in the 1960s, said you got to redraw districts every 10 years. So in 1970 and 1990s, we had the legislature and the governor deadlock on partisan grounds through the redistricting up to courts. Then we've had two redistrictings, 1980 and 2000, where lines were drawn by the legislature with both parties negotiating with the governor.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindman. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.
You name it. We've tried it in California. This would be a return to the past with legislatively drawn districts. One important thing to note about California's independent redistricting, citizen redistricting. It was created originally by voters and pushed by good government groups in 2008 to not include congressional lines. The commission, the Prop 11 that created the commission, only said that it would draw state legislative and Board of Equalization lines. And that's precisely for this reason, right? When all other states were doing partisan gerrymanders, people didn't want to unilaterally disarm California. It was only an additional initiative passed 2 years later, backed by a major Republican donor, Charles Munger, that expanded its realm to Congress. That's been its purview, and it's drawn state and congressional lines in 2010 and 2020. This proposition, Prop 50, would take away that congressional power. But in some ways, an argument can be made that it returns to what was the original vision of the Citizens Redistricting Commission when it was backed by voters in 2008.
Very interesting. So then in the future, do you see a point where voters may vote to remove congressional districts from this measure altogether, rather than it just being temporary?
That's the argument that Democrats are making in California nationally. Let's do all or nothing, right? Either every state has an independent citizen commission, which is something that Democrats have pushed and advanced in some of their highest priority legislation when they've had control of Congress recently. Or if every other state is going to do a partisan gerrymander, let's give California the ability to do that to rebalance and even a playing field. That was the pitch that you heard Senator Weber make. That's the pitch that Gavin Newsom has made. Right? Either we disarm everyone by putting districts in the hands of citizens, or we empower California to fight fire with fire by having the lawmakers draw maps that counterbalance what they see as a Republican partisan gerrymander in Texas and other red states.
Right. So that in mind, there are a lot more states than just California and Texas. So what's the likelihood we'll see similar moves in other states?
I think unfortunately for sort of kind of voters everywhere, this year looks like it'll become an arms race of partisan gerrymanders, with Republicans pursuing this not just in Texas where they have, but they've created a committee in Florida and are looking at it in a number of other red states, Missouri, Ohio, perhaps Indiana. Democrats have a few states, Illinois, New York, where they might be able to redraw districts in this way. And really pushing to this arms race means that even if the number of Democratic gerrymanders perfectly counterbalance the number of Republican gerrymanders, and we are left with the map that we have today, which is a set of pretty even districts, unbiased at the national level. Even if we were able to do that, there's still a loss by those Republicans in California who don't have a voice, by those Democrats in Texas who don't have someone reflecting their interests. Overall, in this arms race, voters and American democracy would lose, but Democrats are making the pitch that they didn't start this arms race, but they need to pursue it to create fair districts in the aggregate at the national level.
Well, given this arms race, what does that mean for the political control of Congress?
Right now, Congress is balanced on a knife's edge, and all the polling suggests that President Trump's policies and many of his personal actions have been quite unpopular and would be pointing towards a midterm loss by the Republican Party if they had these districts today. There look to be more opportunities for Republican line drawers across the state to give themselves advantages than Democrats. But if we see a big shift among the public, the kind of shift that brought like 100-seat shift in Congress against Barack Obama in 2010, or also a major shift against Donald Trump in his first midterm in 2018. If voters move by that much, there's not these battles along the edges that will control a dozen or so districts would be overwhelmed potentially by the public sentiment. But if we see another narrow, close election like we have the last few congressional contests, these lines could make the difference.
All right. Well, California Republicans have now filed their second lawsuit to block the redistricting plan. The California Supreme Court rejected their first attempt to block the plan. But now President Trump also said a federal lawsuit may be in the works. What do you make of these efforts, and are they likely to get in the way of this going to votes in November?
Well, all of these efforts do deserve their day in court, just as nearly every time you have a redistricting plan, you have a lawsuit, right? There's a lawsuit that Democrats brought against Texas's redistricting plan. That's based on voting rights. This, as I understand it, well, President Trump didn't specify the grounds of the federal investigation. The state one is based on that this initiative would affect multiple subjects. Those grounds don't look tremendously promising for that lawsuit. But we're going to go through that process. That's part of the checks and balances of American democracy. But it's not a surprise to see a lawsuit. It would be a surprise if it knocked this initiative off the ballot. We'll have to see.
From your standpoint, do you think Prop 50 is likely to pass in November?
I think if Democrats can make this a referendum on Donald Trump, it wins. Right? There are a lot of other important values and a lot of other important things to think about with this initiative, but I think right now we're at a point in American politics where Donald Trump and his policies are still the animating force. They are dramatically unpopular in California among both Democrats and independents, where about more than twice as many independents disapprove of him as approve of him. And everyone's looking for a chance to fight back if they're on the left. And so by giving voters that chance to cast a ballot against Donald Trump in November for Prop 50, that's going to be a compelling message that Democrats can give and give them a good shot at this win.
All right. I've been speaking with Thad Kousser. He's a professor of political science at UC San Diego. Professor, thank you so much. As always, I appreciate your insight.
Thanks for having me.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindman. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Bill Howe Plumbing, Heating and Air, Restoration and Flood Services. Family owned and operated for over 4 decades, Bill Howe has been serving the plumbing, heating and air, and water damage needs of the San Diego area since 1980. With their fleet of trained professionals, Bill Howe has the ability to service all major and minor plumbing and HVAC emergency needs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Bill Howe is committed to providing excellent service to their customers with transparent quotes and attention to detail on every job. Whether you're in need of an HVAC installation, plumbing, or water damage restoration in San Diego, they offer the convenience of scheduling an appointment over the phone, online, or through live chat on their website. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com because we know how.